So my wife was nice enough to pour me a tea, and of course she gave me the giant moose mug to, to use during the meeting.
Okay, so we are out on. We're out on the internet live.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Peter.
Hi, everybody.
Hi. Are we all here?
So, Mr. Chair, we're just waiting for David Duplessis. It's
Okay.
5 o'clock. I suggest that we give a few minutes. And for those who just joined, I've already launched the YouTube recording.
That's nice. Could somebody please tell me who David Duplessis is?
David is LSD Advisory Chair from Douglas.
From Douglas. Okay, thank you. It's just that when he joined us the last time, I was thinking, okay, who's this person? Great.
He was intimately involved in the York project.
Right. Okay. Very good. Thank you. Gee, Brett, you want some fancy equipment here, don't you?
It's not for me. It's for the staff.
Sure.
Yeah. No, you gotta have it.
I like the $1 million bid on the leachate. That was good.
It wasn't it.
Like
I
a
think
dump-
that there might have been some wishful thinking that nobody else bid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. I'm just proving I read my homework.
Oh no. Wrong with that.
You looked at the graphs at least, right?
Yep. Anyway, so mute that.
So it's 2 minutes after, Mr. Chair. I think the vast viewing audience would probably like us to get started. And
Well, I'm
it is
in
time.
favor of that. I don't know. David had some problems last time, and I've been on a couple of things with him, so I don't know.
Right.
Okay, I'll call the meeting to order. I believe, we have the agenda. Okay, you've all had a chance to look at the agenda. Could I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Seconder, okay. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Okay, the agenda is written is okay. Anyone have any conflict of interest declared tonight with regards to the agenda that you have before you? Having heard none, we'll move right into the tenders. And Brett.
Peter. So the first staff report speaks to a tender for our the acquisition of our forwarder, and that tender package was issued on January 19th and was approved during the 2021 budget process. Staff were also directed to make an application to the Municipal Capital Borrowing Board for $440,000 to fund that purchase. Unfortunately, no bids were submitted for this tender. Now, you'll see in the discussion section of the staff report, Section 60 of the regulations under the Procurement Act. In this type of a situation, they allow a Schedule B entity, and we're categorized as a Schedule B entity in the Act. It allows us to use alternative acquisition or procurement methods in this kind of a scenario. In this case, the method that we chose to use was to solicit 3 prices from known suppliers. So we solicited those prices using the same specs that we used in our tender from Tormont Cat, Brandt Tractor, and SMS Equipment. Now, when we received those bids, we used the same evaluation method as we typically apply in a tender process. We graded based on price, technical competency, delivery date, and warranty. And you'll see in the in the table, in this case, Brandt Tractor either equaled or outperformed SMS in all categories. The other important note here is that this is not an additional machine. It's a replacement for an existing machine. The forwarder is used to transport large bales of garbage from the baling facility to the active disposal area. And so trade-in offers were also made as part of this bid process. SMS bid $15,000 as a trade-in. Brandt Tractor offered $40,000 as a trade-in. And the numbers again that you see in the table have netted those values out. So those are the actual costs that you see there, the $465,000 and $449,200. Now, when you factor in the budgeted amount was $440,000. When you factor in the non-refundable portion of our HST, the total cost of the recommended equipment is $468,450.47. And the difference between the budgeted amount and the actual cost is $28,450.47. And that additional amount can be covered by the operating fund. So that leads me to the recommendation, and staff recommends in this case that the committee forward the motions that are contained in this report to the board for its consideration. I do have to apologize before the discussion begins. You'll notice that we have two motions, motion and then motion 5. That was a typo and that's my fault. I apologize for that. So ignore the motion 5. You're not missing any other motions. It's just those two. Mr. Chair.
Oh,
Okay. Are you going to read those motions, or do we want to have some discussion first?
I can
Mr.
certainly.
Chair, I would suggest that where the committee makes only a recommendation and not a decision, that you could have a discussion about it now and come to some consensus as to whether you want to forward this motion or some other motion to the board.
Okay. So, Mike Chamberlain.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just wondering, Brett, if the fact that we had to go looking for somebody to bid that we ended up paying more than we maybe should have?
I don't think so, Mike. That hasn't been our experience in the past. Sellers are usually, they're pretty eager to make a sale. I was comfortable that with the prices that we received. In fact, one of my concerns was that if we went back to tender again and there was only one bidder, in this case, they would know they were the sole bidder, and we may end up having to pay more than we would have otherwise.
Agreed. Thank you.
Well,
Anyone else have any questions? Brett, maybe I missed something in your discussion, but when you went out for tender initially, why were these 3 not considered, or were they, or what? How would that work?
yeah, they certainly were. It was we invited bids from all of these suppliers.
Okay.
SMS, part of this tender involved, we wanted to keep the price as low as possible. And so on the back of one of these machines, you have a large platform. And we wanted to salvage the platform from the old machine and attach it onto the new machine. These forwarders are typically used for a forestry operation. Our application is slightly different. And so SMS wasn't able to, initially they said it was too difficult to supply a machine without a deck on the back. And that's why they didn't bid. Brandt did bid, but they were significantly off spec. It was a smaller machine. I'm not sure why they bid such a small machine, but it didn't qualify. It was disqualified from the process. And CAT recently acquired a company that produces these. However, they won't be in full production until 2022. So.
Okay. So just again, these three were all invited to tender, and they, for whatever the reason, none of them did, but you went back to them a second time. And they were all
Yeah.
quite well, it's interesting.
It is. It's not the first time that's happened, Peter.
Okay.
We have had incidents in the past where we've issued tenders and no one has bid. Typically, it's for smaller machines. I think they just thought it was more trouble than it was worth, possibly, with the additional work of supplying a machine with no deck and reattaching a deck from another machine. To give you an idea, it would have cost us about an additional $100,000 had we bought a machine that was pre-supplied with a deck.
Okay.
So, yeah.
One of the things we don't know, Mr. Chair, is to what extent COVID is impacting this supply chain. It's impacting all supply chains, and there's a shortage of many things, and so that is a possible factor that's working here.
Yes. Okay. What's the wishes of the finance committee?
I'm in
Susan?
agreement with both recommendations, both motions.
I am too.
I am too.
Okay.
Myself
Then
as
I
well.
guess our the committee I guess suggests that we, or not suggest, but I guess I can use, are in agreement with forwarding these two motions on to the board for their reviewing.
Yep.
So as part of your the report that we prepare for the committee for the annual general meeting in April, will include this staff report and that motion.
Okay. Then I guess we can move right along to the next one, the leachate collection tender.
Thanks, Peter.
Okay.
So in this case, Solid Waste Division issued a tender package on March 9th, soliciting a construction company to build a leachate extraction system on a portion of the landfill that is below the cell that's scheduled for construction in 2021. We did receive tenders in this case, which is positive, or bid submissions. We received 3 submissions, and the tender call specifies that we will award this tender no later than May 22nd. Now, the background on this is a little more interesting than the last report. Elevated leachate levels in monitoring wells located in the original portions of the landfill, and so this is the portion of the landfill that was filled back in the late 80s or so. First identified elevated leachate levels in the mid 2000s. Now we've been monitoring those leachate levels regularly through these wells for the past few years since they were initially noticed. And following a leachate extraction study that we undertook last summer, it was determined that the leachate is not in fact in one large pool, as was sometimes hypothesized, but rather in small pockets perched throughout the landfill itself. And these pockets of leachate were almost sandwiched between layers of impermeable clay that have been deposited in those cells over the years. So they just couldn't drain. And that, again, it's a good example of why we use a permeable cover these days, like pit run gravel. It allows leachate to percolate down, gas to percolate up. Everything is happy. In this case, back then, we didn't know what we know now. We used clay. So the end result is this perched leachate. Now, the study that we undertook last summer looked at a variety of methods, including pumping with small pumps. That was deemed to be ineffective. And the final recommendation from this study was to install a leachate drainage system, which essentially is going to mean the installation of drains on the perimeter of these old cells that will lead to a lift station, which will then pump the leachate out to the leachate treatment pond. The reason we wanted to do this, there was some concern of loading up the top of your landfill cell with these new cells that we're building that were piggybacking on top of the old. There was concern that that loading would cause a uncontrolled breach of this leachate out of the sides of the cells. We wanted to avoid that, of course. So this is the safest alternative and should be the most effective alternative that was identified. Now, in the October 22nd, 2020 meeting of the board approved the 2021 budget, which included the cost associated with cell construction for the landfill. And the total amount budgeted for 2021 was $700,000, and that's funded from operations. Now, typically, when purchasing equipment, you'll recall that we use a variety of factors in grading bids. In this case, where it's a construction project, the only two factors that we look at are the ability to complete the project and the price. And so in this case, the low bid, and they are qualified, is Filson Limited. They put in a bid of $561,240. On the second page of the staff report, you'll see the table. And as we discussed a little earlier, quite a range in bids. However, Filson and Monteith Underground were certainly the lowest. Filson was the absolute lowest at that $561,240 mark. So again, those numbers in the table are pre-tax. When you apply the non-refundable portion of the HST, which is 4.2855%, we end up with a total cost of $585,291.94. By way of comparison, the engineer's estimate for this project was $505,967.17, and there's a difference there of $79,000 approximately. That variance between the Filson bid and the engineer's estimate is largely due to higher than expected costs in the trades, primarily electrical, labor, and the plumbing, we'll call it, but the interconnection of the leachate piping system that we're going to install. It's important to note, I know this is an expensive one. It was worth noting in the report, though, that compared to the alternative, which would be construction of the cell that we term B5, which requires significant excavation, this still does represent a significant savings. You may remember that in the fall, myself and Mary Kay discussed it, but the estimated cost for cell B5 is $2.3 million. So this is still significantly less expensive than the alternative. And therefore, staff recommends that the committee forward the motion contained in this report to the board for its consideration at the April board meeting.
You're on mute, Peter. There we go.
Yeah, I apologize for that. Any comments, Susan?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. When you talk about the system here, is this sort of draining into a giant holding tank and then it pumped out, or how does this leachate transfer into the lift station? Because the lift station involves a big holding tank, doesn't it?
It does. You're on the right track, Susan. What it would be, essentially, if you think of the landfill as a landfill cell is a large rectangle. What we're going to be doing is cutting slices out of the perimeter of that landfill cell, and there you go. So we'll be going around, cutting into it, installing a coarse rock in those trenches. Of course, those trenches will be lined with a geomembrane liner, a geotextile liner. We'll then put the coarse rock in. And those will all be directed through a line channel system to the lift station, which is a large, essentially a manhole with a large output pump that will then be connected to piping that will tie it into free draining cells. So, and the only other thing I'd add to that is we construct that kind of a system in reverse. So we start at the lift station, we work our way back. The last thing is breaching into the side of the landfill, and then everything starts free flowing.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Anyone else have any questions, comments? Just a matter of interest. Brett. Oh, sorry, Mike, go ahead. Mike Chamberlain.
I'm in favor of recommending this to the board.
Okay. But I do have it's a matter of interest. We have this leachate sandwiched in the landfill. And are you able to identify the location of those sandwiches? When you go, well, if you're going to drain it, you got to find it.
Sure.
How does that work?
This basically what we're doing with this approach is we're providing I guess a path of least resistance, for lack of a better term, for the leachate. And so the idea is once you create those weak points, those drainage points in the landfill, the leachate will eventually migrate to those points when we start loading it up. And when I talk about loading it, this isn't a small load. It'll be in excess of 100,000 tons that we'll be placing on top of it. It's an extraction method that is widely used in the Netherlands for dewatering wet areas, and it's quite effective. The alternative was, you're quite right on that, Peter. When we did, it's hard to find this stuff when there's pockets. And our study that we undertook last year involved approximately 6 extraction wells and 3 monitoring wells with piezometers to measure the leachate depths at various points. We would then drop down these pumps into these wells and pump out over a period of, they pump continuously 24 hours a day for months at a time. And we were measuring the impact if you pumped on one side, what it would do to a pocket on another. Are they connected or not? And it was deemed that they weren't. And that's why we chose this approach. It's really the only approach available to us, and it should be quite effective. The only downside is obviously it's a little more capital intensive than the pumping method, but it's certainly the safest method. We're guaranteed extraction using this approach.
Okay, thank you. So Mike suggested that we forward this on to the board for their review and approval. Anyone have any objections to that?
Nope.
Then that's our recommendation, Don.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, so the committee's report in April will include both staff reports, the fact that you reviewed this, you satisfied, the committee satisfied itself, and we'll make these motions to the board. And I expect that I'll have questions, and Brett, and they'll probably be very similar to the ones that we heard here, and Brett will respond to those.
Okay, thank you. If there's nothing further there, we'll move on to item number 5, general discussion, direction to staff. Anybody have any comments, anything they'd like to discuss tonight other than what we have already discussed? Okay. Then I would like to ask for a motion to adjourn.
I so move, we adjourn.
Seconder?
Second.
Okay, Mike Laney. Thanks everyone for joining us this evening. It's good to see you, David. And